At least it is our dream that when we work together, it's the right, yes, sorry, that when we work together, that we manifest another way of being together and being in the world. I want my artistic practice to not only be about care in an abstract or purely representative way. I would argue that this is the main reason why I work in collectives. When realizing projects among friends, we constantly try to find these transgressive moments of togetherness. With the way we work together, how we produce, we are all somehow trying to unlearn the capitalist logic of having to be productive, trying to make the best of it, trying to create a product that looks like it was produced with 20,000 euros, while it was produced with 2,000. It is always an ambivalent process, and we are failing at it all the time. However, I initially had a vision of this group of people, 5 to 10, 12 people even, being together in the space of M1 in Hohenlockstedt for a few days. In our way of being together, we create our own space, and this fictional world becomes reality, even if it is just for a second. In all of our practices, it is such an urgent topic to ask how, while operating inside of the logics of the art market, of funding and all of that, we can unlearn certain habits and ideas that are so inscribed in our bodies or performances and thinking.
Ipek and I have been working together in different forms for many years before we founded Hekate Film Collective in 2020. For Hekate Film Collective, each project is a process in which we try to organize collaboration differently. Malu had made it very clear from the beginning that they had a lot of trust in us and our aesthetic, and we went through a very deep process of talking about the images and the visual language. We decided that we wanted to use different aesthetics, such as glossy, high resolution images like the ones in the tent, and rougher material that we shot on mini-DV, like the scenes on the beach. We wanted to visually reference low-budget video material because mini-DV has this history of being accessible beyond the film industry and continues to be important for low-budget productions. Negotiating how low a budget can actually be without putting ourselves into too much precarity is an ongoing topic with a strong urgency for us. We want to make films that we love, but
we want to survive. It is interesting because we are talking about stories of collective survival here, and we are thinking about apocalypse and sci-fi stories that are reflecting the society. And through them, we want to talk about how to survive and how we survive. How does our art survive? How can we not live in precarity? And how can we do it together? Because each time we think we are close to such a point, we break again. Somehow, how a film is shot and the materiality of its images cannot be thought so much different than how an entire production functions. In early feminist video art, we see those aesthetics are never separable from the means of a production.
In this project, for instance, we worked with 4, 5, 6 different cameras in the production, different people behind the camera, different people in front of the camera too. We constantly switched positions. There were moments when people were exhausted or got ill. These things happen. But there was a general trust in each other to take over when needed, while also not considering this so much as a takeover, because ownership was not central at that point. Another important element, for example, is that Sophie, who is trained as a Grinberg body practitioner, gave us sessions during the shoot. When I got ill, she treated me, and if she hasn't done that, I would not have been able to shoot. These things are really connected.
Thank you for listening. This is from the publication that Malu will have soon out. And I would directly ask her the question of how the the whole process of thinking about this film came about just we would like to have this conversation a bit close at the beginning and then open it to public if it's okay. And we would like to start first talking about the film and then talk about queer feminist collective practices so that we also have a space for this amazing film to shine. Yes, so yeah.
So maybe to start a little bit giving some context. I started working on the idea, I think, almost 3 years ago when I was actually moving away from Vienna. And was really thinking about collectivity in a utopian way, or the utopian potential of collectivity. And then care came into this more like as a very important, let's say, queer feminist survival strategy. But also something that we mentioned in this text now before, still in your own practices, no matter if it's in the personal life or professional life, realizing how you cannot not fail at this. So in, I think, January 2019, I think so, I received the Artist Advancement Award by the Arthur Buskamp Stiftung, which is an art foundation in North Germany, in Hohenlockstedt, like really close to the Baltic Sea, but also close to the, what is it? Never mind. And so the curatorial program of this 2-year period was all about care, and it was curated by Saskia Beiler, who had the did the artistic direction in that period, and I was among 2 of the awardees, and the other. The other one was actually, interestingly, also a collective which deals with motherhood from a feminist perspective, and being a mother and an artist, and producing art. What? Producing and also producing art from the perspective of motherhood, including your children. So, what was I going to say? So that was the framework. And I actually went on a residency there, so really on the countryside, but they have a lot of space. So it is how it is described in this text. It was really all about, okay, what we have here is this infrastructure, and we have the space, and it's such a nice space also. And it's also a landscape that I know very much from my childhood. So it was something that was very familiar for me and very emotional and personal also. So I basically thought, it would be great just to go there with my dear friends and produce something about, a utopian community, something about friendship and belonging, and that's basically what we did. And then, what was really important was that I decided very early in the project that I was going to collaborate with Ipek and Laura, who had in this time also founded Hekate Film Collective, and it became a very close collaboration. And then COVID hit, basically, and the entire exhibition that was going to take place to premiere the film more like in an exhibition context was cancelled, and I was living in Berlin. All of my collaborators were in Vienna, and I kind of really had to finish this project in this weird space. And in the end, we premiered the film as part of a program. I'm sorry, I think this is too close, right? We premiered the film in a program about care at the Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin in an online screening, and now also as part of the residency that I did in Hohenlockstedt, I'm going to release a publication on the entire project, about the film, but also really about making it and contextualizing it a little bit. And I'm working on this with a Dutch publishing house, which is called Onomatope, which also has an art space. And this is actually now going in print, so it's going to be released sometime in late summer. Yeah, so a little bit about how everything came together.
Shall I ask the next question? If you want to. I don't know what you're asking.
Where are you asking?
Shall I? Yes.
Okay, Malu, actually, when looking at the film again, I mean, one part is the voiceover and the text that is very strong. Maybe you want to elaborate on that a bit, like how you worked on the text or how this came to life. But the other thing that we also discussed a lot is the term of the care warrior that you introduced and that you're also writing a lot about in this publication that you just mentioned. And while looking at the film, it's really interesting for me to see, okay, how do you depict the image of care? What do we actually imagine when we talk about care work, taking care, and the way how you are showing your characters, your creatures. They have a very specific costume and reference to a very specific fashion, and I would like you to elaborate a bit on your references on care, and maybe also how this goes together with the text. So it's about the care warrior. What is a care warrior?
Okay, I think this was not one question, but 10. So I need a moment to maybe... so one is the figure of the care warrior. Yes, I think care warrior was, I mean, it's not so important, maybe, it's not even so important for the film, but then somehow it is. So I think when I developed these figures that my friends were gonna play, that somehow it was going to be, I mean, I really wanted to show somehow a collective that is big enough to be understood as a collective that really somehow lives together and exists together and has like this own kind of reference or their own system of meaning or their own cultural system in a way in this weird like space fallen out of time maybe. But also maybe in different times, and maybe they are not the same all the time. And I mean, okay. I think creating this idea of a care warrior is something like putting together two things that are probably considered as two things that cannot really go together. Or when we think of care, we often think of maybe other images or figures that are either more vulnerable or more this or more soft or more this and that. And I mean, what you also said the other day, care often goes together with this idea of figures like the mother, or like these are maybe classic caregiving figures. And obviously they are very important caregiving figures, but also how care is such a feminized, not only profession, but also topic in general. And for me, kind of putting this into a dialogue with something that is maybe more aggressive or more violent, not necessarily and not all the time, but that there are figures maybe that also care in different ways, and somehow trying to show that, I mean, care is just as much as femininity, which I find just as important that it doesn't have to exist, or that it doesn't really work in such a dichotomy, that care is this like soft and touchy-feely and weak, just the same as femininity is coded, but that care and the actual care work that people do, no matter if it's like professionally or if it's care work for their communities, emotional labor and all different kinds, but that care is something very, very precarious and something very, very vulnerable, but that in a capitalist, neoliberal world, care and caring acts are actually something extremely radical, and I find it really important to think about it that way. And I think a lot of the ideas and a lot of the images really depart from this kind of claim, in a way, to consider that our world is not uncaring by accident or so, but really like neoliberalism is uncaring by design. And I think this idea of using maybe sci-fi a little bit as a reference point, as a genre that is so much about telling or imagining other worlds, about world making, bringing this together really to find a way to tell a story in which caring, I mean, as a utopia that will always fail probably, but really in a radically different way compared to how I experience it as this very precarious thing in my own biography also, or in general.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And also maybe a bit like that in a system that you're describing or speaking against, that it's also that anger, aggression and rage is a form of caring. I think I found this very also strongly in your film.
Can I ask a question? Because I have a question about rage and vengeance that is so present in the voiceover, and because some of your chapters are also called Creatures Born Out of Hopelessness, so there's a certain hopelessness that you introduce to the world that they live in, and then they are born out of hopelessness. Yet there is also that you also show the joy of them living together, and you show the joy of queer bodies, like you represent, like how you represent them. There are these joyful moments, there are these celebrations, and I was just wondering if, like how you think about hopelessness and joy together, maybe also in this film, but also it could, I mean, I don't know, I was really, interested in this.
I mean, I don't know really. Haven't thought about it before, but what you say about joy, I mean, there are these moments of joy that we actually see, but for me, I think what was one of really these pillars also was actually pleasure. And I think this is something, I mean, pleasure, but also this playfulness and really like the joy of doing this together. And even though it deals with maybe hopelessness, it kind of deals with it in an understanding that puts hope and hopelessness in this dialectical kind of relationship. So I think this entire story is about that, like like this loss that we are facing, maybe as a generation or several generations, or especially generations after us. And in this like hopelessness, kind of still finding moments that make it worth to hold on to a certain fight or a certain struggle and just continue. So, I mean, Creatures Born from Hopelessness really say that, like, and I find it really important, or I find it really interesting also from a lot of other projects that I did in collectives, how sometimes you can find connection through differences, but also connections in together feeling shitty. And I think it really, I mean, also at this point of time when I was working on the project, this was something so important, and finding these finding the utopia in the dystopia. And I think it's really about that, like having this like horrible starting point, but somehow finding moments that kind of
imagines a different future, imagines a futurity.
Really, even if it's really in its pure potentiality in this, like that, just imagine maybe what is in 300 years, or what could be a generation, so many generations after us, and what's gonna left from what we do now a little bit. Or also thinking about us as a generation maybe, who we want to be and what we want to impact with the politics that we are involved in, and like what do we want to have as our or what do we want to give over as our inheritance maybe. And it's a little bit about that, like that I imagine also this film as something maybe in the future, but also being about us and thinking about us and what we do through kind of an archival lens, that this is like this kind of archive from the future, and we have these different media or different image qualities that also refer to different times of filmmaking or different times of producing archival material, and it's sometimes a little bit distorted, and you don't really, like, you kind of deal with this archive, and you just, I mean, everyone who has worked with archives knows this. You are trying to find something, and everything you have are a few brocken, or like you only have these fragments, and you kind of try to weave them together in a way that makes sense, but it might not even be the actual story of what happened, but just through the lens of today, how it makes sense. I mean, today when I looked at it, I really had to think of it like this, like a bit of a collage of archival material from the future, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I lost a bit track of time, actually. I don't know if we should open up.
I think it would be good to, I don't know how to
Yes.
work this thing. I feel like a microphone warrior.
Go for it.
Can I use the tool? Yes, I can. Yeah, I thought it would be good maybe to open it up to the audience. And of course, we can continue talking about the actual work in collectives or collective work and what that means. But I think it would be nice if there are questions about the film and the production of the film. Is there a question? I would go around with this fantastic microphone. Not yet. Yes.
You were already asked about because it's different sound layers. There is a voiceover, but there is also the music score. And I would like to know about this music score. Who did it? It was in the credit line, it was very fast, but I read it is you and somebody else, so it was produced for the film?
Yes, thanks for the question. So yes, basically almost all of the sound was produced for the film, and it was produced, like some parts were completely by me, and a lot of parts were also created together with my brother or by my brother, who is a music producer. His name is Blume. And there are also like 2 additional songs, like one in the beginning and one in the end by a friend of mine, that just made sense. So yes. And then, yeah, I don't know what else I could say, or if there's like a further question about the sound level.
But the sound you had already, when you were thinking or conceptualizing the film, you had already in mind the sound, or in what kind of direction the sound will go?
Most of the sound, I mean, really of the like music and sound design came afterwards. So it's a little bit like put on top of the images in a way, because more or less, I started writing the voiceover. Yes, there was a question before about that, and how it was written actually, so I can elaborate a little bit on that. Because before we went on the residency with everyone, with the bigger group, I was there once with IPEC, and we were also actually developing a workshop format for a biennial in Turkey, the Sinopale in Sinop. and that was going to be about post-apocalyptic storytelling and collective storytelling, and also as a writing workshop, actually. And EPEC at the same time is interestingly worked on kind of a similar project as this film. I mean, there were at least some parallels, so we were both kind of at this time trying to really get into writing. So we developed these writing exercises and scores and like different methods that we were really trying out in a very playful way, and realized, this is working so well. And then being apart again, because EPEC is based in Vienna and I'm in Berlin, we would sometimes really meet up and continue doing this, and almost the entire voiceover was developed in that way. But there are also some quotes from different pop culture, different films, like the end is an entire quote from The Matrix. And so there are a few references, and also in the film music, let's say, there are also a lot of references to film music that is used a lot in this genre of dystopian or post-apocalypse. Yeah.
More questions? More questions? Because if not, then I would ask a couple of questions, I think. It came to my mind. I thought it was nice that you kind of talked about a collage of archives from the future, because I thought that's a really beautiful expression of that and what we saw to a certain extent. And then I also thought about a collage of different effects and atmospheres and textures and structures, much more than a contingent storyline, I would say. But for me, that makes sense as an opener or as a beginning. And I think this beginning is also stressed quite a bit. So you have basically several beginnings, and you cross genres in these beginnings. When I think about the images of the women jumping out or kind of posing in this kind of very genre-specific way. What I'm interested in, or where I thought, I'm not sure if I understood it, or if I don't know, I have to think about it a little more, is this relation between the narrator and the images, the narrator, the camera, kind of the subjectivities that are behind that. There seems to be, I don't know, it's I think good that it's complicated, but I was like, what? I'm unsure about the relationship between all of these. I want to know a little bit more about that. Who is narrating? Is that somebody part of the group? Is that a voice from one of these future archives? Or, yeah, how does that come together? Or how did it come together?
Yes, thanks for this question. It's a good question. I think I'm also unsure about the answer. And I think it's really part of, it somehow is also, as you said, part of the storytelling that's a little bit complicated. And sometimes you don't know, is this a narrator from, like, that speaks from outside, or is it someone from the group? And sometimes it is, also with the voices. And then sometimes it's my voice, and I'm almost not in the entire film. So it really is like the things that happen on screen, and also the things that happened during the shooting were really about these like switching positions, as Laura said it in this conversation that the text is based on, and that it's sometimes really unclear a little bit, not only who the speaker is, but also what time the speaker is at, or I think it's something that I really also wanted to keep open. I mean, I was thinking about having more of a like more continuity maybe, or more of a like red line in this storytelling, to hire really someone who does it in a professional voiceover. And I think the way we did it in the end, it also just came together. I don't know what you think about this.
Okay. Yes, actually, I mean, I saw the film quite a lot now. But I must say that I also had to think a lot about the voiceover today again, and also these different layers. And somehow I still find it very powerful, and I also find it very powerful that it's a bit unclear who's actually speaking, and that this also has some kind of potentiality of not knowing exactly who is speaking, and also hiding a bit in the collective in a way that pushes certain ideas to the front without being vulnerable as the identifiable speaker. So that came to my mind, and yeah, I also thought that it's really like these chapters are kind of also claiming that they are chapters, and that they are constantly saying it's now the beginning, and it's this spiral, which is also like a thing that we know from queer feminist history, that to certain degrees fights feel like constantly repeating. Like when I dive into archives and look at the fights from generations before, I'm like, oh God, this sounds like I just said it 5 minutes ago. Like it's so there is also something about the constant beginning and constant struggle that is to a certain degree frustrating, but also to a certain degree encouraging somehow to see, okay, someone fought before me and I'm catching up, or I don't know.
Just wanted to add something about the subjectivity, because I also saw today again, like in the names of the chapters, it was first the creatures are like born out of hopelessness, and then it switches to we own the night, and there is an also interesting switch to claiming, okay, now we are in the we, and then also the voiceover changes for me that, okay, I'm as an audience also in the we, and I'm not only looking from outside, I'm part of that we, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you said, Laura, was actually something that I was so much thinking about at that time, and I had to think of this text. There's a text by the Danish scholar Mathias Danbold, who researches queer histories, but also there's this, I think it's on the concept of touching histories, and where he describes this scene of going to a protest because there was like really bad abuse of a queer person in Copenhagen, and then being out in the street chanting slogans like "We are here, we are queer, we're not going to disappear," and other slogans, and thinking how decades ago, I mean not so many decades, but still decades ago, let's say during the AIDS crisis and a lot of protest around that, these were already such important slogans, but also what you say, like other feminist or queer feminist politics that, I mean, and also now we're in such a political situation where so many things are going through these backlashes, and things that once were an achievement can so easily be taken away. And I think this is something that you also talked about in after your screening, no? So this really frustrating moment, but also the ambivalence of it, of thinking, hey, there is also this kind of connection across time and across history, and finding something so empowering in this. Like also on the other hand, the continuity of these struggles and the continuity of these fights, and this was something that was really, really important for me. And in some parts of the script, it's actually like really calling for the ghosts and calling for these like lost struggles or lost figures or lost creatures, but also at the same time the kind of lost planet in a way. But yeah, finding this, like finding agency or finding belonging in this as something that can also be productive, I think.
I mean, today, when I was watching the film again, I really saw the whole film as a big chanting. Like, really, it was this 30 minutes of gathering up the spirits. And I was like, oh, it's so nice to see it together with other people, and maybe it's like this collective chanting to past and present and future. I really had to go a bit into the witchy and witchcraft, and I don't know, like something about the temporalities that you already like spoke about.
We
It
have
was as if like you made this film to like, to gather up powers to chant together.
There's a question here.
Hello, so thank you for this beautiful film. I was curious, since the collective and the collaboration is such a central thing of this work, if there was a discussion of about authorship, or if this was clear from the beginning to the end, or if there was, a process. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Such an important question, and it's interesting that we haven't mentioned this before. I mean, it's always tricky. And for me, I mean, in my work, I have almost not done solo works because I'm really not interested in it. And then with film, I mean, you can make a film by yourself, but it's always a certain form of collaboration. It's more the question like really the distribution of tasks and the distribution of authorship. And I think in this project, kind of, even though the collaboration and actually like, especially during the shoot was so important, the entire, like it was quite clear from the beginning, it was my idea, it was my script, I was directing, but also working with people that are really good friends of mine. And I mean, some of them I had actually lived together, others like Ipek, we have worked together since a very long time actually. And so somehow it wasn't even in the question, I think. It was kind of clear that it was my film, but also at the same time, it's super clear that it's a collaboration. But what I find always really, really tricky is because it can also be so vulnerable, and how you find the words to really like, or how to properly give credit to the work that people do for such a project. And I think this is also a moment of failing and failing and failing and just trying and failing, or maybe not. But it's, I think, still something that I am also figuring out in a way. But I mean, I have worked mostly in collectives before, and then it was clear the entire concept usually starts as a collective idea in a way. Or I mean, it's never really, okay, we are a collective of 5 people, so each person does 20% of the work, because also there are so different types of work. I think in each context, it is very individual, and you always have to find an individual way to also give credit to it, or kind of make it visible. And I think for me, when I look at it, it's so visible, like how it's made, and also this kind of pleasure of doing it together, and these moments of really just trying out and being playful together. And that's really also a story about that, right? The desire to do such things and being able to do it and share it. What do you think?
Yes, I think it's an important question, and I'm happy you asked it. And yeah, I mean, for me and Ipek, who kind of are the core of Hekate Film Collective, we realized quite in the beginning that we share that we share a certain desire to deconstruct a bit of the idea of the individual artist genius. So, but this is now 8-9 years ago that we started to work together, and we really always struggled in still trying to define ourselves as something that you can easily label and find a structure and find a way. But what is the thing that we really like to do, and that is also core of our practice that we are kind of a core collective out of two, and we don't want to be an artist duo that always collaborates with others. So that's a kind of choice, a political choice to say we are a collective, and we are not interested in being an artist duo or doing something together always. And we have very different interests, and I like that. And I like that every project is again for us the question, okay, how are we doing this? Like, for whom are we doing this? How are we shooting it? How are we financing it? And how do we deal with the division of labor? How do we deal with authorship? How do we do with image rights? Like this whole questions of production that we really say, okay, this is an important question for us. And if you work with us, we kind of have to talk about this. Because, yeah, I mean, there are these things, especially in this film, it was a very low production. It was a kind of exchange deal of labor or friendship deal. So it was for me a thing that I thought, oh, I really want to shoot this film, and it's a privilege right now in this moment in my life that I can dedicate my time and energy and work basically for free for such a long time on this project. And I find this really important to also say this is now a choice, but this is not how it should be. It is work still. So yeah, I think I now extended the question a bit, because in every project it's different, and in this case it was very clear that it's Malu's film and that we are doing the camera performance. In Ipek's case, I was not performing, never. And yeah, and it was that was this way for this film, and it was a really good experience, and it was very clear that this is Malu's film somehow, and that's fine. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Questions? Yeah, there's one.
Hello. So thank you for this amazing, strong film. I was wondering, like, you obviously decided not to show the enemy of this team, and I was like somehow, because also of the Matrix reference, I thought of my childhood and remembered Power Rangers and these weird creatures that were appearing. Have you thought about, like, what would this enemy look like? Did you have any imaginations of the aesthetics or the dimension, or like what kind of a enemy was there in this film that we didn't see?
Thank you. Well, I think I also like the idea of having this like enemy in a way. Like I'm a very pop cultural person, and this is more of a reference, like way more of my references actually come from mainstream cinema. And I also liked some of these like simple kind of, you know who you have to target in a way. And then somehow at the same time completely deconstructing it, because it's completely not about like an individual person. And then like once I watch these mainstream productions, after 30 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, you could have done so much with this idea, and you just decided to do such bullshit. And then just, yeah, okay, it's about this Endgegner figure, and for me it was really, I really like to play with this, like always, in the end it's this one person maybe, or one collective that you have to overcome, and that's gonna be the end of it. And but really it being about a structure and a political system in a way, and also like with this Matrix reference that also, now it's so long ago, and but it's still for me such a cult reference in a way, from the time when it was just so, I don't know, so good at that time. Maybe not anymore. but also this like fight against a structure that sometimes appear or is being embodied by figures which we didn't even show, and also it was really about that, I think, addressing this structure, evil structure more.
I mean, as one of the performers of the film, I was just imagining this really evil, whatever, capitalist structure. Like, I was really in the mood of like rage, like bringing a rage, and it was easy to gather up a rage because, I mean, we were living together when we were staying in this residency when we were producing it. So, you know, like every minute is together. So like there's so many things to rage about, and it was really easy to bring up these moments and then be like, okay, performance mode, although like none of us are. I mean, I'm not a performer. And not everyone in the performers, it's not anyone's practice per se, some. But I always imagined it like this super loose thing, like never embodied into anything, like the systems.
Me neither, yeah.
There's another question here. Yeah, thank you for the amazing film. I really enjoyed it. I have one question about how you conceive the interaction between human and more than human or non-human beings, and the role of, I think, the role of the place and the environment.
I mean, ideally there would have been even more non-human figures, let's say, or agents in the film, but yes, totally. I very much considered also the landscape or some elements in the landscape as agents in this entire story. Like the sea is so important, and also like how she goes to bath in the sea, and like these scenes of transformation or rebirth and so on, or washing yourself as a ritual to get ready for something or to wash something off, and like really water about this, like as part of this processes of transformation. So so yes, it was really important, but at the same time it's also really in a certain, I mean, when you're at such a place, it was clear that we wanted to do things outside. I mean, there are also these like very staged scenes indoors in a film set, but it's also, what was I gonna say? I forgot, sorry. I mean, maybe you can say something about this, as also both of you have worked a lot with the genre of the landscape film.
Yes, why not? Yeah, I was also just thinking that this is maybe an interest that is common in all of our practice, that on the one hand has really something to do with being interested in the land and in the knowledge of the land, and also the history of the landscape, that you know somehow that it was there, that certain acts happened there, and imagining also what happened on this land or on the spot before, history that is erased, buildings that are erased, like stories that happened. That's something that is a collective interest of all of our practices. So somehow we also approach the land as a protagonist or as a character in our films. That is somehow we are trying to dig into it to get some information that was erased, that is not in the archives. That is, you see, I don't know, you see a tree and you know it's super old, and you just, I don't know, you just try to understand what happened on this land. And this is, of course, a practice that in classical research we try to unlearn also, which also has a specific history. But also another aspect is the land is for free in a certain way. It's a public. We are dealing a lot with public spaces, like as a thing, and with privatization and dispossession. And if you're a precarious filmmaker, you try to find the land where you can shoot because you don't pay for it. And this is also I think an important part. Why are we doing this? You already are somewhere. You don't have to have a big budget to create something. You are there and you're dealing with it. And this is also kind of an experimental documentary approach. You are dealing with something that is actually there. So yeah, some thoughts from my side.
No, this is a really important point. I mean, it was also really important to go out to the nature because we wanted to create this kind of world that is not so easily to be put in a certain age. So anywhere else would have been traces from our civilization. So it was really also about that, like where can we actually shoot that doesn't really scream in your face. It's here, yeah. And I mean, if you're in a really big production, you can maybe shoot and clear out around the Stephansdom and whatever, and then in your after effects make it into a ruin. But already this like clearing out or getting the allowance to shoot somewhere is already such a strong limitation that it was just kind of clear, like with the landscape, and on top of that being in a place that is on the countryside. So Hohenlockstedt is really a tiny city close to Hamburg. And what's nice about it is actually also this landscape. So it was really like the entire idea grew from this, like, it's also going to be some kind of post-civilization, post-apocalypse kind of scenario that at least is a little bit ahistoric in the way in which it looks, right? So I think that's also how the landscape became so important. So that was, yes, you reminded me. Thank you.
That's why we are working together.
Are there more questions? Because I think I would like to ask one maybe last question, but also to get back to the topic of working in a collective, because you, Laura, talked about struggles before, struggles as queer feminist struggles, basically, that kind of return throughout history. And I was also thinking about the struggles within, because I mean, I've worked in collectives and I know it's sometimes really not easy. It's there's also these struggles within a movement, not even in a collective, not even talking about the collective level, but like the feminist movement, for example, or the different feminist waves, and how sometimes it's a struggle with historization and what that means. But I think I'm more interested in the struggles within a collective and how you deal with tensions that can come up, or when I did some research on your practices, I also ran into a lot of collectives you're working with. You kind of, it's funny because there's like all these names in there, and I was like, okay, at one point I have to read it out loud because it's fantastic how these collectives basically protrude your biographies. So I'm really interested in I think we heard a lot about what is wonderful about it, and I think this is clear. But I'm always interested in the fights, maybe a little bit in the gossip. We talked about that. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I mean, thank you for this question. I think when we talk about what's great about collectives, it's also we don't necessarily want to bring out as this utopian one solution that is easy to work with. It's hard work to be in a collective. It's actually almost harder than doing things by yourself. It's a constant communication, it's constant tensions, it's constant like how to deal with the tensions, like thinking about, okay, how to do things better, how to get resources, but also how to distribute resources. I mean, these are, when you read our biographies and see some of the collectives, some of them are not there anymore. And this is because we failed at them in that formulation, or failed in the sense of we haven't failed. I don't want to say they failed, but let's say they no longer are among us. But there's still the hope. I mean, this is also the interesting thing. It's a decision, and we make it also really clear when we talk among each other that this is a decision that we decided to be a collective, and it's a decision that we are working with and for. And it's not necessarily, we are not in it because it makes things easier. It's yeah, it is a struggle, but I cannot necessarily say I mean, there are so many things that actually came from the audience as a question, like authorship, funding, money, distribution of labor. I mean, these are, and how Lara was talking about that, these are things that we constantly think and talk about, also depending on the different projects, because of course our resources also change. I mean, we all wish, I mean, this is the whole point of maybe wanting to be an artist. We all wish to earn monies from our practices, which is not possible. So of course all of us do other works, and then you try to do your artistic work on the side. And how this comes about, and your shifting financial status all the time also becomes a super major thing on what you can take as a role in the collective, and how much you can take and how much you can give. And this is a constant shifting point. We are not stable in our positions, and that's why it's also a constant work.
Yes, maybe also to add on, because yeah, I mean, Ipek and me, we were also like teaching together about collectives and collective work, and it was also
film
collectives. Yeah, it was on film collectives, and also the students who participated, of course, were teaching us from their struggles, from their failures. And one thing that also became super clear is, yeah, I mean, what do we actually expect when we talk about collectives? Do we expect now this is the better version of doing something? No, I think it's not about better, or yeah, the thing that you said, yeah, we talked about everything that is great, but I mean, a lot of the work and a lot of biographies is also really much influenced by very painful breakups, by very painful departure, by realizing, okay, I thought we were talking about the same, and it's not working like this, and we want different things, or we have different ways of wanting them, and then trying to understand what we also perceive as failure, or how we can see certain people, certain collaborations as a certain part of our lives. And I mean, also my own perspective changed so much through every project, of course, and I also think like, hey, I said this, and now I'm realizing through this, okay, no, this is not working anymore. And I don't know, I feel like we want a stable identity and stability a lot, but I don't know. I don't think that this is working like this. And yeah, because we are changing, and that is good. And a lot of things were very painful, really tensions also during this film. I mean, it was also super exhausting, and of course then you have to deal with personalities and all these things. So, but yeah, people, I mean, we are we are all complicated in the end.
But it's not only working in a collective, it's then, I mean, you can be a collective but have like kind of more a relationship as colleagues, or like, especially when we were still at the academy, it was a bit more, it's also a little bit lighter because you're maybe not as much already trying to make a living with it, or you're not necessarily there where you have to claim that. I mean, a lot of people have it already, but it's just at the point where it's impossible. And so it's not only this collectivity or working together as a collective, but especially for us, we have also done a lot of working with friends, and this adds a layer on top of it that can be so great, but that can, as you said, be also extra painful, because you have maybe a conflict while working together, and it's really about the work or the process of it. And this entire precarity adds so much pressure on top of that, and so many struggles around really resources and giving credit and all of that. So then when you go through a conflict, it can be even worse, because like out of this conflict about work, also personal, intimate relationship can be over, or can like you can take this baggage actually into your personal life. So it's also very much about this what you call it, Entgrenzung of work and life that you anyways already have in the cultural sphere anyways, but especially as an artist, I think that because artistic work is very much also something that is so much about identification, or that has so much drive comes from this identification. So this is really something that I personally find also really hard to deal with, and I have also started to enjoy working in collectives with people that are not my friends, or I see the benefits in both. So it's really, as you said, there are benefits of it, and there are really things that are super hard. Yes.
Thank you. Maybe that's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
a really good point.
Yeah. So I am actually very tired.
No, I would like to thank you for coming and for
Thank you for inviting us.
showing the film,
Thank
doing
you.
the conversation. Thank you for coming. The bar is still open. Go upstairs, get a drink. Drink it upstairs or outside in the garden, please. No, because we're closing down this space, but the bar is still open, and there's the garden at the back, and you can take the drink outside. Yes, thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you.